Hola amigos, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos a un nuevo video. Yo soy Mariana Botello y como seguramente ya lo vieron en el título de aquí abajo, hoy vamos a tener a otra autora aquí. Vamos a entrevistar a ML Río de Todos Somos Villanos, este libro que ha sido pues muy aclamado en Tik Tok y nos dieron chance de tener una pequeña conversación con ella. Entonces, pues bueno, no tengo nada más que decir, disfruten esta entrevista y vamos con el video. Thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm doing really well.
Yeah, how has been Mexico City?
It's been lovely. I've only been here for a couple hours, but it's been great.
That's great. Great to hear. I wanted to know a little bit about you. I read you write about music too, and that's a completely different thing from writing novels. How did you discover this part of you?
Oh gosh. Well, my dad grew up in Los Angeles in the 70s, and he was a concert bouncer when he was, like 17, 18. So he took my musical education very seriously, and when I was about 9, he dropped a pile of CDs on my bed and said, educate yourself. So I did, and it just sort of became kind of a lifelong obsession. My writing process is very much informed by music, so even when I'm not writing about music, it's a big part of my creative process. So yeah, it's always been kind of interwoven with my fiction writing.
Okay, and what bands or musicians did you hear when you were young?
Oh man, well, so many, but my dad got me hooked on David Bowie when I was very young, and everything just kind of splintered from there.
And then how did you get into novels? What did you wrote first?
So I actually wrote a bunch of novels before I wrote If We Were Villains that were not very good.
Since you were 12,
Yep.
I read. Yeah.
Yep, wrote my first novel when I was 12 and fortunately realized it was not good and not worth trying to get anyone else to read. But, I think that's part of the process. Like, learning how to write, it takes years, and you're going to write some novels that are really bad before you write one that's kind of readable. But, I got started reading at a really young age as well. And after a while, like, reading just kind of wasn't quite enough anymore. And I was like, I want to do this myself. I want to build my own worlds and make my own characters and write my own stories. So I started doing that when I was in middle school and just kind of kept doing it for a long time. And then when I was a senior in college, I started writing villains, and I kind of went, okay, this might actually be worth reading.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was the first idea for you to write this novel?
Well, so I was also an actor. As you can tell, I've worn a lot of different hats. I was an actor for like 20 years. I started doing theater when I was like 6 years old and just kept doing that for a long time. And I'd written all these books that weren't very good, and I couldn't really figure out why. There's this very trite piece of advice you hear when you're a writer, which is write what you know. But it's actually very good advice because it's hard to write about something accurately if you haven't experienced it, if you don't know what it feels like. And I was in my senior year of college, I was writing my senior honors thesis, which was, I actually took 3 of Shakespeare's plays and kind of smashed them together into one play. And then we staged it with 10 actors, including me, playing 77 parts. It was chaos.
Wow, easy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think at one point I was playing Buckingham and Richard III, and I had to do a quick change that I only had like 6 lines to do this quick change. But while I was doing that, like a light bulb went on, and I went, okay, why have you never written about that? Because this world, this really strange world of being a Shakespearean actor, I knew that really well. And as soon as I kind of went, what if I tried to write a novel about this? It all just came flowing very naturally, and I went, okay, this is the book that you're supposed to write. So that's where Villains came from.
Wow, and when I was reading the book, I wondered like why there was so much of Shakespeare in the book, and then I read that you studied Shakespeare at King's College, which is a great university. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And well, that explains a lot. But where did your obsession, to call it away,
no, that's fair,
of Shakespeare came from?
Also very early, actually, funnily enough, about the same age I was discovering David Bowie, I was also discovering Shakespeare.
Okay.
My parents had a library, just like a room with a couple of bookshelves. And when I was a kid, I used to just steal books out of their library, and I wasn't really sure if I was allowed to be reading them or if they were for grown-ups. So I would take them and hide them in my room, and I found a copy of Shakespeare's Comedy of Errors, which is not the best play and not the first play that anyone reads. But I took it and ran upstairs with it, and I read the whole thing in one sitting, which for a 9-year-old, fairly ambitious, and I didn't understand a lot of it. But the language really grabbed me, just like the beauty and the poetry of the language. It was like there was something there that felt very important, and I didn't really understand why. But I took it downstairs, and I was kind of crying at my mom about like, where has this been? like she was hiding it from me or something. And she went, well, there's more. And she gave me a complete works. And that was kind of like just something that I read for years. And I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's like, why do you fall in love with any one writer the way that you do? And I think it was partly because I was also an actor. But yeah, it just sort of spoke to me. And so it became this thing that I did academically and also made a novel out of it.
Yeah, wow. So you took a lot of pieces from your life
Yeah.
and put them all in a book.
Yeah.
The actress part, the
Shakespeare
writer
part.
the Shakespeare part.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
And well, something that I really liked about your book is that characters talk between them with Shakespeare quotes.
Yeah.
They're always quoting Shakespeare. Was that difficult? How did you took those fragments from the real Shakespeare and put them in your book? Was it difficult to take Shakespeare, which a lot of readers from nowadays never read, and put them in a modern novel?
Yeah, it was funny. It was difficult to sell that. Editors were like, what the heck is going on in this novel? Like parts of it are like written like a script and there's like so much Shakespeare.
Yeah.
It was a hard sell. People are like, I don't know if readers are going to get on board with this. But when I was writing the book, I kind of went, it's Oliver telling the story. He's an actor. He's a Shakespearean actor. How would he tell the story? And that's how he would write it in acts and scenes. He would write the dialogue like a script because that's, how his brain works.
Yeah.
And it was also how my brain worked for a long time. So I was studying Shakespeare and reading so much of it that those lines came very naturally, came very organically. And I don't have all of them perfectly memorized, but it was kind of like, oh, how would that character express that thought? What's their favorite play? What are they thinking of? What character are they playing right now that those lines are going to be right there on the tip of their tongue? So it was a very organic process. But then in the editorial process, like once we got an editor and my agent involved, there was a lot of them going, okay, it's a little too much Shakespeare, like reel it in. So if it's readable, it's credit to them, not me.
Yeah, I really like those parts, and I really like the parts where you take the structure of a play, because I feel that makes the reading more dynamic.
Yeah, that was something I had never seen in a novel before,
Yeah, me neither.
and I really wanted the performance element of it to feel very alive, which is why I chose to write it that way. And I know it takes a little getting used to when you're first reading it, but the editor, my editor for this book, her name is Christine, she's lovely, she really liked that element of it, and I went, great, someone who gets it finally. So I'm really glad to hear that it feels dynamic for you.
Yeah, I really like it. Did you experience something like this? Like, maybe not the murder part, but the type of school part, the type of group of actors part?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately it never escalated to murder, but there's
Fortunately.
could have been possible. Yeah, I spent so much time as a Shakespearean actor, and it is a very culty, it's a very intimate, culty kind of a world to be in. That's really compelling as a reader. It's like the idea of getting to be in a secret society while you're reading that book. You kind of get to feel like you're one of the characters. And, we all crave that kind of belonging. We all crave that kind of special community, which is part of the reason that, everything I write, and I have 2 more novels coming out in the next couple of years, they're all group stories. I don't really do books that only have one main character. It's always about group dynamics and how people interact with each other. And theater and conservatory schools are a really great setting for that, because it's take a bunch of young people, make them be really vulnerable with each other, and then put them under enormous pressure. And they're gonna crack up and they're gonna break down and they're gonna go nuts. And it's difficult when you're living it, but as a reader, it's so compelling. So
Yeah, of course.
yeah, that was
Seeing it from the outside.
yes. So that was definitely a lot of it was drawn from my own experience, but of course it's a little bit exaggerated because, none of my actor friends got murdered. There were a couple that I might have wanted to murder along the way, but
Well, glad you didn't do it.
maybe.
I felt that in some parts, your characters merged with characters from Shakespeare. Like they start, I don't know, it's more a sensation that I don't know how to describe, but they start like merging. Was this on purpose or?
Totally.
Okay, and how did
Yeah.
you plan that part?
Well, I mean, that was also just very much based on my experience as an actor. When you're playing a role, you kind of have to live in that other person's body and their experience, and it sort of colors everything you do. And it's interesting because writing is the same way. Like when I'm working on a novel, everything I do is kind of dictated by that novel, like the music that I'm listening to, for instance. Every book that I work on, I have a playlist that's got like 1,000 songs on it, and I'm just listening to that constantly because it keeps me in that world. And I think that happens for actors as well. Like, you are learning to live in this other person's body in their life, and it affects you. Of course it does, and it kind of becomes part of your personality. And I was also interested in this book with this idea of typecasting, because that happened a lot in the Shakespearean theater, you know, back in the 1600s, and also now, as an actor, you have to be able to tell a director what kind of parts you play, what you're a good fit for. And a lot of it is kind of molding yourself to fit into those roles. So part of the tension in this book is all these young actors who have been typecast for 3 years in this program, one of them is suddenly gone, and the dynamic shifts, and everybody has to learn how to play different parts, and some of them start acting against type. Because one of the sort of morals of this book is that people don't fit into neat little boxes like that. You can't typecast real people. So Meredith is a great example. You know, she's been kind of typecast as the femme fatale her entire life, but she really wants to be taken seriously as an actress. And once she starts pushing back against that, it creates problems. So that was something that was intriguing to me. It was like the roles that were assigned and what happens when we deviate from those roles. Yeah.
Okay. This book takes place today and in the past.
Yeah.
When you do this, you write first the past, now the present, and then you mix them, or you go back and forth while writing?
Oh, you know, it's interesting because I like to play with timelines. I'm really interested in time as a construct in literature. Villains was very deliberately structured like a Shakespearean tragedy. That's why it has that, it's acts and scenes instead of chapters. So for this book, I actually wrote all the scenes in order, which I don't always do, just because I knew I wanted it to follow that arc. So even the prologues that jump forward in time, it's kind of all of it reflecting on the past. So I wrote those in the order that they appear in the book. But with the book I'm working on right now, I have two separate timelines. One is 1989 and one is 2016. It goes back and forth, but I wrote those scenes completely out of order, just kind of when I felt like, yeah, that's the right scene to work on right now. And then I have a novella coming out in the fall that takes place in the course of one night. So it's just like 10 hours, and each character gets to narrate a couple of hours. So that one I also wrote in order. But it really just depends on the project. You know, every book is a little bit different in the way that I write it.
I saw on TikTok that a lot of people feel that this book is a mix of, well, as if the secret history from Donna Tartt and Shakespeare had a baby. It would be.
Oh, that would be an interesting twist.
Was that a real inspiration for you?
You know, people tend to think that the secret history was more of an inspiration than it was.
I haven't read it, but.
You know, it's people are always really surprised when I say this, but it's not one of my favorites. I think it does some great things, and it's the most kind of visible novel in this genre. So I did read The Secret History, but I actually only read it once. And there were a lot of things about The Secret History that kind of bothered me. And one of them was, it was a lot of queer baiting, and the female characters have zero personality. There's only like one, and the only reason she's there is to kind of get passed around among the boys. And I found that very frustrating, especially because these campus novels tend to be like that. They tend to be very male-centric, but academia is overwhelmingly female, especially in the humanities, so that just didn't feel real to me. Similarly, there are a lot of queer people in academia, and particularly in theater, and that was something that I didn't see a lot of in this genre. So in some ways, I wanted to sort of, not correct, but kind of address some of the shortcomings of the campus novel genre. And this is not, you know, it's not just Donna Tartt that's guilty of this. Like, there are many, many campus novels that I could point to. Yeah. But the ones that were actually really more inspirational for me, and there were a bunch of them, were John Nell's book, A Separate Peace, which I read for the first time when I was like 11, and it really upset me. And it was the first book that really upset me, but in a way that was like addictive, and I reread it every year for like, you know, 7 or 8 years. And the other one was really anything that Iris Murdoch has written, but particularly there's this book called The Book and the Brotherhood that is about this group of academics who kind of reconnect at a reunion a bunch of years later, and then their lives just fall apart. So yeah, I mean, you write any novel that's kind of a campus genre, it's gonna get compared to Donna Tartt, which is great. But yeah, that was actually less influential for me than a lot of people think.
Okay. And last but not least, well, have you encountered difficulties to be a writer as a woman? I feel that we are in a more woken present right now, but it's still harsh. How has been your experience with that?
Definitely. I mean, yeah, we're definitely making progress, but anyone who thinks that sexism in publishing is a thing of the past is very wrong. You know, it's interesting, like, for instance, I have a pen name. ML Rio is obviously not my legal name. And my publisher was kind of in favor of something that was sort of gender neutral because a lot of men will not read books written by women. And I get emails from readers still that are like, I don't usually read books by women, but I kind of liked this. And it's like, thanks.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and you know, female writers we're made to answer a lot of questions about, well, how do you juggle writing with your personal life? And no one asks male authors that. I also get a lot of questions about, like, how did you write a male narrator? Like, how dare you? How could you possibly understand that experience?
Yeah.
Again, no one asks male writers those questions. And another thing, and this is just sad but true, and this is not just publishing, this is really any industry, and especially as social media becomes more and more prevalent in the way that we market things, what you look like really matters. And it used to be that nobody cared what you looked like as a writer because no one ever saw you. Like, there might be a picture in the back of your book this big, but people didn't buy books based on how hot you are.
Yes.
Now, in the age of influencer culture, that is a thing that publishers are thinking about. They want to see you on camera when they're buying a book to know if you can perform well on social media, if you are, like, sellable as a platform. And there's much more pressure on women to look nice and to look attractive than there is on male writers. You know, they can just show up, you know, covered in barbecue sauce with a 5-day beard and everyone's like, he's a genius. And as a woman, you really can't do that. So it's definitely changing for the better, but progress moves slowly, is what I'll say.
Yeah, well, let's hope it gets better.
Yeah.
But has there been, like, I don't know, maybe something specific where you felt that you were stuck or you didn't get to that part?
Like writer's block or?
No, stuck as a woman. Like,
Oh.
there was like a block because you were a woman.
Yeah, well, you know, the place that I actually run into that more often, because publishing is also very female. Publishing is like 95% women.
Yeah.
Of course, all the CEOs are still men, but most of the workers are women. Surprise. Really, where I actually run into that more is with my music writing, because I do a lot of writing about music. I don't write music, I do a lot of
Articles about
interviews, reviews, that kind of thing. And because my pen name is kind of gender neutral, sometimes people who are very respectful and willing to engage with me in email, once they meet me in person, I kind of get relegated to a lesser category of, like, they assume that I'm a groupie or somebody's girlfriend and don't take me seriously, or they sort of assume that I'm there for their entertainment, which is always a tricky line to walk when you walk backstage, you're the only woman in the room, and you have to kind of figure out how to play that.
Yeah, of course.
So that definitely happens. It's harder for me to be taken seriously writing about music.
Wow, that sucks.
It sucks, but you know, it's somebody's got to do it, and again, that's another thing where women are making more and more of a splash, but move slowly for sure.
Okay, well, but thank you so much for this interview.
Absolutely.
It was a great interview. I love it. I love to know a little bit more about the person behind the book.
Well, thank you so much, and you asked wonderful questions, and quite a few that I haven't heard before, so that's great.
That's great. Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Y bueno, muchísimas gracias por ver este video hasta acá. Nos vemos a la próxima. Síganos en nuestras redes sociales, lean el libro si no lo han leído y estén al pendiente de las próximas publicaciones. Bye bye.